go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Lara Ehrlich, and our guest today is Kendra DeColo. Before I introduce Kendra, thank you all for tuning in, and please chat with us during the interview. We'll weave your comments into our conversation. If you enjoy the episode, please also consider becoming a patron or patroness to help keep the podcast going. Clearly, I cannot speak today. Now I'm excited to introduce Kendra. Kendra DeColo is the author of 3 poetry collections: I Am Not Trying to Hide My Hungers from the World, My Dinner with Ron Jeremy, and Thieves in the Afterlife, selected by Yusuf Komundyaka for the 2013 Saturnalia Books Poetry Prize. She is also co-author of Low Budget Movie, a collaborative chapbook written with Tyler Mills. She has received awards and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, MacDowell, and the Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Malay Colony, Split This Rock, and the Tennessee Arts Commission. Her poems and essays have appeared in American Poetry Review, Tin House Magazine, Waxwing, Los Angeles Review, Pitch Magazine, Vita, and elsewhere. She has performed her work in comedy clubs and music venues, including the Newport Folk Festival, and she has taught at Sarah Lawrence College, Vanderbilt University, and the Tennessee Prison for Women. She currently teaches at the Hugo House and lives in Nashville, Tennessee, where she has a 5-year-old daughter and a baby on the way in August. She describes writer motherhood in 3 words as adjusting previous expectations. And now, welcome, Kendra.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me be part of the show and be part of this community. I feel like it's become its own network and family, and it's an honor to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's definitely the goal, is to have a community around writer motherhood. So I'm really thrilled to welcome you into it. And I'm going to hold up your book here, which we'll talk about a little bit. I Am Not Trying to Hide My Hunger from the World. Kendra, remind me, since I have a copy, I don't quite recall, is it out yet or is it forthcoming in a month or so?
It came out in April, so it's been out for a couple months. Yeah. And so I'm kind of like midway through the scheduled book tour, and it's been fun. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll talk about virtual book tours a little bit too, and about the rare beast of what that is. But
yes, the book is available. It's out there.
Yes, definitely. So everyone, please pick it up. It's amazing, and we'll get to that. But first, Kendra, tell us a little bit about your 3 words for describing writer motherhood: adjusting previous expectations.
Yeah, right. Or I almost put it constantly adjusting expectations. And I mean that, I feel like that could sound kind of negative or like, oh, everything's always being readjusted. But I mean it in like a really beautiful way, that to be fluid and flexible is such a wonderful gift of motherhood, and to really see that state of having to change kind of who I thought I was and what writing looked like has been a gift. And it's kind of inspired, or I feel like that was really made clear for me in the book of 100 essays I didn't have time to write, by the playwright. And of course, I'm blanking on her name, but if I remember it, I'll put it in the chat. But she writes that she felt herself being annihilated by motherhood. And then she came to this realization, then fuck it, like let this previous self be annihilated. It must not have been that great anyway, if it could so easily be dismantled. And how that gave her permission to just walk into the next chapter. And I feel like there's so much I felt resistance, and how beautiful to say, like, no, I actually have this freedom and this power to shift perspective and change what I thought I was going to be and do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right.
I love that book for any. Yeah, right. Thank you, Dinah. Sarah Rules.
Yes, so good.
Yes. I love books that sort of like yours, that take the feel of motherhood and represent it in different forms than we come to expect, like 100 essays left unfinished. That's
Right.
exactly what motherhood is like, right?
Yeah. And how that's not like a deficit, or it's not like, oh, they're unfinished. Right. It's like this amazing, like what an incredible invention. Or like, I mean, I love Fragments, and I love things that are unfinished and that find their other half like a year later, you know? Like I feel like so much of the book was written in that way. Like, all right, I'm just gonna write these fragmented thoughts at 4 a.m. And then like 6 months later, I'm like, oh, okay, like these fragments are like starting to find each other. And so it's a much different pace than what I was used to. And like, I like to write kind of like feverishly and like one go. And, but this, yeah, it was really nice to kind of have my life inform my writing in a real way.
Absolutely. Did you write the poems in this book? I guess how far back in your 5-year-old daughter's life did you start writing these poems? Like before she was born, when she was just born?
Well, so the book My Dinner with Ron Jeremy, which is the book before this, I wrote when I was pregnant. I got the book contract when I was like, 2 months pregnant, and I was like, I'm going to finish this before she's born. And I got to go to a writing residency and really work on it. And so it was written in this kind of like amazing, like pregnant, horny state, which is like part of the like porn conversation that occurs. And then after, so then my daughter was born, and I really didn't write for probably the first 7 months or so, except for, sometimes taking notes. But I really couldn't, like I felt, for a lot of reasons, I had postpartum anxiety, and writing itself felt very fraught for me until writing actually became like a life raft and was a way for me to like put myself back together. But around 7 months, and really when she was a year old, that's when I went to AWP for the first time, the writing conference, for anyone listening who has not had the joy of going to AWP. And that was a real kind of coming back to myself. And I wrote the poem "I Pump Milk Like a Boss" after that conference, and that felt like a breakthrough and like kind of a way to find my new voice. So it took a while, but she was pretty young. And then when she was 18 months old, I didn't have childcare until she was 18 months, and then once that happened, I could have a more like sustainable, creative schedule.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's a long time to be without childcare and trying to write.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, my partner is very, like, he's a stay-at-home, he's kind of a stay-at-home dad, but a writer who works from home. And so we had the flexibility where if I really felt myself needing, like, I need to work today, that we could trade off. And so that helped a lot, and that made it possible.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I'm getting that third trimester windedness. My diaphragm is pushed up. So
take breathing breaks whenever you need. That's okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And thank you for coming on in the middle of your third trimester-ness. That's incredible. Yeah. So let's go back to, you mentioned how you had changed as a writer when you had your daughter, both in finding a new form with sort of piecing together fragments, and also in the logistics of actually getting writing done. Tell me a little bit more about the difference in writing your previous book and this one, I Am Not Trying to Hide My Hunger from the World.
In terms of kind of like the day-to-day, like what writing life looked like between the two.
Tell me all of it. Yeah, what writing looked like, what the experience of writing the poems was like, just how had you changed as a writer?
Yeah, well, and it's funny because My Dinner with Ron Jeremy was my second book, and I wrote it pretty soon after my first book, and it felt like I wrote it like once I found out I was pregnant. I think I had those, and I've talked to other mother writers. I don't know if you felt this way, but this worry, like, okay, I'm not going to write again, or like this is that window's closing. And so I was like, okay, 9 months, let's do it. And so there was, and I really feed off of that kind of external pressure, or like having that momentum, because otherwise, I think we can sit on things forever and not, or I'll speak for myself, I can sit on something forever and not really finish it. And I really liked having that kind of like with my daughter being born, like this other project that I knew I wanted to really give a chance to be out in the world. But at the same time, it was rushed, but it was also, it's like, the days, what is that phrase? The days are long,
Oh,
but the
yes.
years are short. It was very much like that. Like I had these long, luxurious days because I didn't have a small child to look after, and I was doing a writing residency. And so it was, I wrote for, 8 hours a day, and I was at McDowell, and they bring you lunch. And so I was kind of this like pampered pregnant panda while I was there, like getting the best bamboo. And it was glorious. And I was reading a lot of Diane Seuss at that time, she's my forever kind of poetry godmother, and just like badass punk high priestess. And so she was very much with me there and kind of guiding me on and teaching me how to write autobiographically, while also having that lyricism and kind of fantastical leaps. And so that was my dinner with Ron Jeremy. And then it was also about porn and having this conversation with Ron Jeremy, and kind of, which was, I think, a way of closing this chapter. I mean, I'm always going to write about sex and sexuality, but it felt like at the time I thought I was saying goodbye to the way that I write about sex. And, I don't think that's really true now. But then I'm Not Trying to Hide My Hungers from the World. It's so different because I didn't see it as a book for so long. It really was like each poem I wrote felt like a life raft, and felt like I am so lucky to have this moment to write this. And just, so when my daughter was a little bit older, in 18 months, I went to the coffee shop 2 days a week when she was in childcare. And like those days are just amazing. And I think I felt a lot of pressure at first to produce. And then once I let go of that pressure, I could really play. And so I think so much of this book for me was really about joy and finding out how to play in language again. Hi, Dina.
Yeah, let's put that up here, Dina.
Dina
says, "You are my badass punk high priestess." Kendra.
Oh, you are mine, Dina.
Thank you for listening, Dina. Yeah, so much of that resonates with me too. The finding the need to play again, and like how to stop taking yourself so seriously at a certain point after you've produced some work, and then you feel compelled to produce more work, and then the pressure, so.
Right. And like seeing, peers go, there was, I don't like, this is like kind of like an unattractive quality, but I think, we all have it to some extent, like jealousy. You're seeing if you're in a position where you can't really be writing, and then you see your peers who are like, just like barreling ahead, and you're like, yeah, go. But you're like, what about me? Like, I don't forget about me, guys. And like, I think I had this thought, like, I'm going to write my way in so that like, nothing's good. Like, I don't know, I won't be forgotten. And like, oh, what an awful way to create, or that was not productive for me. That felt very much like my whole body like firmly responded, no, like we will not respond to that pressure.
Yeah, antithetical to creativity.
Yeah.
I
mean, competition I do think can be really useful, but not in like a self-punishing way.
No.
Yeah.
No. So I want to go back to Ron Jeremy and sex a little bit.
Yes.
So tell me more about sex. I'm going to leave it there and just tell me anything you want to tell me.
Well, yes. What can I say? Because it's so funny. I was just talking about this with someone, how like I write so graphically in my writing about sex and sexuality, but in my kind of persona, like I'm very, I feel like very respectful, or like I don't ever like pry in, like I don't talk about like my sex life, even like with pretty good friends, like, which is so, so different from my life on the page. But I think sex is so interesting to write about, because especially not just sex, but sex in a way that's really flipping the gaze on how women are viewed as sexual beings, and like really writing my way into a narrative that I think when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. And so writing about porn for me was a way to kind of like reclaim my agency as a person who enjoys sex and enjoys pornography and the pleasure of it. I think in the 80s and 90s, it was just women, were so much sex objects. Like it was like the era of Pamela Lee Anderson and Pamela, which God bless her. I love her and have so much respect. But I think like those were like my role models, and that there was one way to be sexy. There was one way to enjoy sex as a woman, which was really not actually enjoying it, but appearing like you're enjoying it, so that the man could get off. And I think I had to, I was really interested in just exploring that and kind of exploring what I learned as a teenager about sex. And so I could go back and really heal a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't really have like a great answer, but why is sex so empowering to write about for me? I don't know, but I know that I like growing up, I loved Madonna. Like she was someone who I was like, yes, like that is a powerful ass woman. And I remember seeing her coffee table book. Oh my God, what is it called? Do you remember her coffee table book? That was like such a scandal.
Yeah. Was it just Vogue or was it called something else? I don't know.
Oh,
I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah, I forget what the title is, but there's, just these amazing like leather photos. And I found those images so empowering because it's like someone who it was, I think even though I was young, like I knew it was a performance, and like for a woman to kind of own a performance felt like so liberating to me. So all of those things feel really rich. And then, I grew up also in Provincetown, like spending kind of like half my year there as a kid. And Provincetown is this gay mecca. And to be there in the 90s was this really vital time, and where like sex and sexuality was a performance. And I really found so much joy in it. And so I think when I'm writing about the performance of sex and sexuality now, it's kind of a way of, returning to joy rather than feeling repressed, which I think is so easy to do even now, like to feel like women still, like if I look a certain way, then I can't really be a sexual person, or if I enjoy sex too much, that's uncouth. I mean, this isn't just clearly stuff that I don't think that's everyone's baggage, but I do think that that's stuff I'm trying to always unlearn.
Yeah. So let's talk about sex and motherhood. and this book where as you said, you are so open about bodies, right? About the female body, and just the first poem in the book that I referenced earlier, and I think you mentioned I pump milk like a boss. I mean, it is just so visceral, and you really get the experience of what it's like to try to squeeze milk out of your body. And
yes.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that, about the bodies of mothers, writing the bodies of mothers, and writing the body of a mother as a sexual entity.
Yeah. And I think in the book, like because I feel like I was less interested in writing about my own like sexual desire in this book, but really using the kind of energy of that language to write about birth and to write about the postpartum body, and to like really, to get visceral, to like talk about, blood on the sheets. And like, I really love bodily fluids. I think like it's an amazing part of being alive that we like leak things, like how we're like slugs, we leave traces. And I don't know why I love it so much, except for it's just like it's juicy, like we're juicy beings, and like I think I want to, and those are the kind of poems I like to write. I love to write things that are full, and I like to read things that are abundant, and so really feeling like claiming like the abundance of our bodies in every way, not just for women who choose to breastfeed, but women who just use their bodies to hold their babies and to just literally keep their families alive. I think it's just so amazing. And I think that those themes naturally draw out a language that's visceral, because it is such a visceral subject. And I think, giving birth was transformative, and everyone has their kind of own birth story. And I think, writing this book was a way of really kind of putting that into language and to harness that power that I felt after.
Yeah. Can you tell me about your birth story? There's a poem in here.
Yes.
Hold on. I wonder, and for anyone who hasn't read it, I'm not going to read it. Maybe you'll read it later, but where is it? The one about the asshole.
I write poems about motherhood.
Is that what it's called? Yep, that one.
Yeah.
I wonder, well, you have prepared to read a poem to us.
Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable reading that one? And then we can read that one later. Okay,
yeah,
can you read that one?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. And then we'll talk about it.
Thank you. And this just a little kind of backstory. So I wrote this in response to, I feel like I've told the story a lot about this poem, but a few years ago, an editor of a well-known magazine tweeted out an article about how women were ashamed to submit poems about motherhood. And then he wrote, "Why is that, guys?" And I just found it so it just really hit me in the wrong way. To hear an editor who does not publish poems about motherhood asking why we're not submitting those poems.
Yeah.
I was like, because of you, motherfucker, that's why. Because you're not publishing them. And also just I found it really offensive that there's this idea of a motherhood poem. And I could just, imagine what his conception of that would be. And so I wanted to write something that would really explode his idea of what a motherhood poem is. I write poems about motherhood. Tonight, I can write the most motherly lines. For example, it's true. My asshole will never be the same after giving birth. Not its shape, but its soul. Small wick of shadow I once called home and dream. Tonight, I can write how it burned like a votive. The whole inverted star, a series of grievances from which another self grew. Seance and seam split off to live parallel lives like vaporish twins. I can write that I gave birth and died and came back to life, and my asshole will never be the same. It wore a haunted look those first few weeks, claimed it needed to take fresh air in the country, wore aggressively Victorian clothes, and strutted around naming geodes like a gentleman farmer. Shut up, asshole, I admonished. Tonight I write my daughter emerged and split me into two selves. It didn't hurt the way they said it would. I rocked on my knees, singing a song like hurtling my voice off a cliff. My husband's hand disappeared into mine, and for a moment I left this world, a hem of blood between us. I broke onto the shore of a fixed note. I helixed and drank the urine of starved apparitions to keep me afloat, slapped the shit out of my reflection, squatted and squeezed a rocky planet out from the blue horizon like a ship bifurcating a labial sky. But my asshole, to whom I must now give credit where credit is due, taught me how to anchor to the earth, locate the hot center which I always knew was there, but never saw, shining in my sacrum like Orion's belt, when they stitched me shut in a ragged, casual way, even though I wished to stay open a little longer, unhinged and full of silences. Tonight I can write that I'd give birth 1,000,000 times over and not tell anyone about it, if I could feel that kind of way again. One hollowed self open wide, enough to swallow my own body, then spit it back out onto the earth.
Thank you. I love that poem. It's not only absolutely stunning and beautiful, but it is funny at the same time, which I don't know how it's tender and powerful, but also made me laugh out loud in some ways. So yeah, so it's just, yeah. So hopefully you all enjoyed that too.
Thank you.
But so tell me, so this is a great example, I think, of how you write so viscerally, yet lyrically, and how you can make bodies and juices and assholes poetic and powerful.
Yeah.
But what led me to ask about that poem was your reference that you found childbirth to be so empowering and so transformative. Yes. And I think the end of that poem about how you wish you could stay open longer and sort of, I don't even know what the line was, but like to consume yourself in some ways. Can you talk a little bit about that, about what your own experience was like?
Yeah, well, I just feel like there was that moment, there's this, you're kind of in between worlds at that point. Like my daughter had been born, she's on my chest, and it's like, I want to cry thinking about it. It's like, I've crossed that threshold. I'm holding her, she's there. And at the same time, I'm delivering the placenta. So it's like this ongoing, birth doesn't end just when the child comes out. And it doesn't even end like after the placenta comes out, right? Like there's this idea of the fourth trimester, but like those first, those beginning hours are so ethereal. Time stops, the time doesn't exist anymore, right? Like you're just in this other state, and there's still that pure adrenaline that you've had, but I was also exhausted. But I remember I just want to hold on to that feeling of holding her for the first time while the placenta is still in me. And so like we're still, she's still connected to me, right? Like the umbilical cord is still there. And like what an incredible, we'll never have that again. like will never have her connected to me in that way. And so I think that's part of it. And really just, it felt, that felt like the right place to end the poem, because that's how energetically it felt after giving birth, that I'm unhinged, I'm open, and like, what a beautiful thing to be. I don't want someone to come and sew me up yet. Like, I want to stay in this state. Because I'm just a feeling like, you'll never feel that way again.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah, you're bringing tears to my eyes now too. Yeah. I think our daughters are the same age. Mine is about to turn 5. So I remember that so well. And like, this is the time at which they're starting to really move away from us, right?
Yes.
Like, they're becoming more independent.
Yeah.
So thinking about that moment of them, I'm going to grab tissue.
Yeah.
Thinking
I'm
about
with
them being connected to you in that way that they never will be again, but will only sort of move further and further away.
I know.
Oh,
it's
supposed to
brutal.
happen, right? It is, but it's brutal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your daughter while we're talking about 5-year-olds.
Yeah. She's magical. She's amazing. She's like not too far away from where I am right now. She's outside playing. And just like a little, I don't want to label her as anything, but I find everything she says poetic, as, I feel like parents do with their kids, and her words find their way into my poems. And just the way, the way she looks at the world is always blowing my mind. And just a tender-hearted, like, incredible, you're going to make me cry, just an incredible person. And and just amazing to see how it just keeps growing. And she's about to start school, and so we're all preparing for that. And it feels like a gift, as as hard as those hard times are.
Have you seen? So how have you changed through motherhood? I mean, that's such a big question beyond writing, but like, in the last 5 years, how have you as a person changed?
Just so much. And especially now that, because I'm in this other transformation where, I'm 7 months pregnant, and that feels like it's, just a very, it feels so different from how I felt like a month ago and the month before that. But I think I've let go of a lot of perfectionism. And, of course, I think that's just, it's like, I'll laugh at myself for saying that later on, because I don't think, I think I've seen it more clearly as how it's a foe, and maybe how I can use it in a productive way. And at the same time, I think I really value my profession as a writer, and really take it a lot more seriously than I ever did at the same time, while also being like not taking it seriously. And I think it's this struggle. And I think someone you had on, you emailed out this like really amazing tweet from another guest who said that, like, fuck balance, my life is a mess, and like that's a good thing. And I think it's only recently that I've really seeing that myth of balance to be so toxic. And I don't know why, like, and it's not even just about motherhood. We, like, in college, or as like a younger writer, it felt like this is thing to aspire to. Like, one day I'm going to have balance. One day I'm going to like work out and eat well and sleep well and write and blah, 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 blah. It's like, I wish someone had just told me, like, you're never going to do that. You are never going to like find balance, and you shouldn't. And I heard like a year ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, I heard this amazing panel with Camille Dungy and Erica Meitner and Tina Chang and Amy Nazika Matatiel. And they were talking about balance, and Amy said something her mother told her, which is that balance is not what we should strive for, but rather we should feel really lucky to have a full life where we're being pulled in different directions. And it's a gift to feel actually like you're unbalanced, because that means you have things that need you. And that blew my mind, like, because I really, a year ago at that point, I was like, okay, it's like, if I can just balance writing and motherhood, I'll be happy. And it's like, I was miserable, because that just could never happen. There are days or weeks where I'm writing and my daughter isn't getting it, and my family's not getting as much of me. And then there are like weeks and months where my writing isn't getting the best of me. And, like, of course, it sounds so simple and obvious to say that, but I really felt like that was so liberating to hear. And I think, the me 5 years ago was like, I'm going to do it all. And it's just, you know, like, who am I doing that for? Like, am I doing that to impress someone on Twitter? Like, that's like such a waste of time. And really, you know, I think my husband has really taught me that, like, you know, the main people who I want to, and this again, like, sounds very childlike that I'm just learning this, but he really showed me that, you know, I want to save the best of me for the people I love and not try and impress, you know, don't do things to impress people who I don't know. And I think that's something that's really hard, especially being writers and needing like a public platform. And we are in the attention economy where, like, to sell books, you want to be like center stage. But I really do want to try and like remember that that's not the center. Like, that's not where I want to like live.
Yeah. No, that's so eloquent. Yeah, no, that's so eloquently said. And it is empowering to think that how lucky we are to be needed and to be pulled in so many directions. That's not something I'd ever thought about. I hadn't thought about it in that perspective. So that's really helpful to me too.
Right? Because like actually, like when we think about like, are there people we know who are balanced? I don't think I know anybody who.
No.
Yeah, and yeah, that's just such a like, it's like very mechanistic, or it's like, that's not human. That's not. I mean, I don't know. It is still like something. I mean, I still like, I meditate and I like to feel balanced, like emotionally, but in terms of like how I designate my day to day. And I even saw like, there's like, you know, some Instagram mom who I followed who, you know, she's just like she's like a lifestyle person. But I remember her revealing to her followers that she's like, you know, today I let my daughter watch like 8 hours of cartoons so that I could get work done. And I was like, you were so brave for saying that. And I don't know why I do know why we're so afraid to share that, because we know we're going to get judged the fuck out of, and everyone has something to say. And yeah, it's like, it's really not easy. I think there was a reason why a few years ago why I felt so protective over my image of the mother. I wanted to seem like a perfect mother all the time, and at the same time be like trying to keep up in my writing. And I think it's because that feeling of being, I don't know if you felt this way, being on the playground, I just would feel like, okay, mothers are like checking each other out. It wasn't always like this supportive community. It's kind of like, oh, like you're letting your child eat those snacks, or that's the kind of stroller you use, or you use a stroller. And just, there's so much of that. And I feel like I don't want to sound like I'm misogynistic here, or like, I feel like that sounds, it's like it's blaming women. And I think it's not mother's fault. We're in a culture that values appearances over like substance. And so like people feel like, okay, everyone is feeling that pressure to perform, and it's so unhealthy. I don't know if other people have gone through that.
I'm sure they have. I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's whether or not it's real, there's shame involved, or fear of being judged by others. And
right.
I mean, my daughter watches TV in the morning before. So we moved to Connecticut a couple years ago to be closer to my parents. And thank goodness we did, because now they can help watch my daughter.
Amazing.
So I can get work done. But before they come to pick her up in the morning, she sits and watches TV while I do work on my laptop. And like, you know,
she's happy. You're happy.
Exactly. Yes. But no, I still feel that guilt of like, my daughter is sitting here watching like 10 episodes of Octonauts while I'm doing work. But who am I feeling guilty for? That's
right. Or we have this invented person who's like, this other mom is out there like making her organic snacks, and who's like has these like activities laid out that are structured. And, you know, like God, you know, there are people like that, God bless them, but that's not that. Why does that have to be better? Like, and even saying that, I start to feel like, oh my God, maybe is that better? And I sound like an asshole, but there's just so much that, I mean, that just such like shines a light on how much pressure is on us. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, I let my daughter watch a lot of cartoons when I have to work too.
Yeah.
And I think I want to say that so that other people are like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like I do that, and that's okay. I'm not going to feel bad anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I try to be very transparent that the only way I get anything done is that my parents are watching my daughter right now when her school is closed and everything.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you look like a super woman, and it feels good to be perceived as a superwoman, but it's not reality. It's
Right.
there's help involved, there's support, there's,
Yes.
it's important to be transparent.
Yes. And like, especially during the pandemic, I'm so surprised. I thought that, I mean, I do think that there were more, I think there's so many conversations actually about the things that we lean on and how it's okay to lean on these structures when we don't have that support. And I really like did open up people's eyes to like how mothers are struggling in general, like even before the pandemic, and that there's not enough support. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what the answer is to any of it, except, get people into Congress and Senate who are not insane and try and be transparent as much as possible.
I mean, that's the first step, right? There was this great series in the New York Times. It's called, was it Primal Scream? I think it was all about mothers who are really struggling during the pandemic, and there were all these think pieces, and it was everywhere in the news, and of course nothing changes. But the first step maybe is awareness. I don't know.
Right.
But then there has to be another step. I don't know what it is. So
I don't know. I mean, this kind of leads me to who I said on social media who I wanted to talk about, but I was just talking about this with my friend's father here, Courtney Love. I feel like, I don't know, how am I going to connect Courtney Love to this? Just I think we need more role models of women who are fuck ups. And we need more, we just need more images and representations of women and mothers, period. But especially to like widen this, I feel like we feel so pinned in that there's one way to parent, there's one way to mother. And Courtney Love is not my role model for mothering, but she is, I think she like holds this amazing territory where she's like, I'm going to be over here and I'm going to do what all the men are doing. And you're going to judge me for it. And I don't give a fuck. And like, we need more people like that to just widen the scape and, just so we can, just feel a little bit more free. And I feel like the freer that we feel, the more power that we feel. And I think that's a start for me. Just feeling a little bit more empowered. I'm
with you there.
Yes.
Let's talk about pop culture a little bit more. That was something that you particularly wanted to talk about. And it's, I love the intersection between pop culture and poetry and, going back to the visceral nature of the subjects of the poetry. So all these things are mixing together in your work, and it's so fascinating. Tell me more about your love of and your interest in pop culture.
Yeah, I love writing about it so much. And I've been doing, my first book, I wrote a lot about Rodney Dangerfield. And it really, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's so poetic, both as a performer and then as just a writer. Like I feel like the one-liner is such an incredible form. And so I feel like there's just, I learned how to write by watching pop culture figures. Rodney Dangerfield, I feel like helped me write, epigrams. And he taught me how to kind of make a turn in my work, or how to keep things concise, but also funny. I mean, you can learn so much from stand-up comics. And so I think that's a big part of it. And then also, someone like Courtney Love, who I feel like there are pop culture loves who aren't necessarily informing my writing, but they're informing how to be really brave in the work, or like how to really stop caring what other people think. And like, I'll listen to like an old whole song sometimes before I write, to just kind of, I think, to get in touch with my 14-year-old self. I feel like she's like huge for me as a writer. Like I really trust 14-year-old Kendra to be truthful. And so Courtney is like a way of connecting me to her. And to be raw. My husband has this really great phrase, to take it by force. And I feel like that just means you don't wait for someone to give you permission. You just take it. And and then I think music kind of really energizes me. I know that a lot of writers have that. My friend Keith Leonard and I, he's an amazing poet, but for a while we were making playlists called Poet Walks to Her Desk. And so we would just like have this amazing, kind of like a boxer walking out into the ring. We had this playlist of like, all right, this is what we're going to listen to when we go to our desk. And so anticlimactic, because then you listen to like this like Drake song, and then you're like sitting in silence at your desk. And now he and I are trading early aughts music videos and kind of challenging each other to write about the most unpleasant ones. And I think that is kind of like when we're doing that, because it's like a low stakes, he's a father, he has 2 kids. And it's a way to just like not have pressure and keep it fun. And
I love this.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And what a great kind of prompt and way to, like you said early on, play and get back to the fun of writing. I love this.
Yeah. And like back to earlier versions, like getting back to like who I was in 2002 is really fun. And like, all right, when I was listening to this 50 Cent song, like who was I? And like, how did I perceive this song? What was I doing? And that's always a great place to start. I recommend looking at a Cameron or Ja Rule. They really can start. They can really bring a lot of interesting things to the table.
Gosh. So I'm fascinated by this idea of a younger self. I've been working on, I don't know what it is I'm working on exactly, but I'm going back through all of my old journals, starting from when I was like 10. And behind the curtain, there's this whole bookcase full of journals, and they're so earnest and so uncomfortable. But like you said, sort of so honest, because we were, at least I was, and I'm guessing maybe you were too, a very sort of raw and like emotionally driven person when you were 14. So reconnecting to that, I think, is really powerful but scary for me, because it makes me feel really like icky, for lack of a better word.
And also I want to mother that part of myself at the same time too, being like, honey, like, don't do it. Like, what are you doing? Like, and like, oh, you clearly needed like someone to like steer you in the right direction. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, you needed to go in that direction to get where you eventually landed. And I love 14-year-old Kendra so much. And I think it's because she was so lost. And so I do, it's like a maternal love, but it really is, the ickiness, I feel there are other ages where I feel like ickiness, and it has to do with just like choices I was making at the time. Like, 24-year-old Kendra, I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. like I don't want to read what you were writing about that terrible ex, like I just don't, I don't want to. But I do, I love, and I do think, music is such a great way to reunite with those selves. I do have some journals, but I think that's so cool that you have that record.
It's interesting. I don't know what I'll do with it yet, but accessing that is very powerful. So I want to know, like, what do you do with that energy once you access it through song? So you reconnect with 14-year-old Kendra, and then what do you do with that?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's kind of, what's the word? Like, not what's the word for when you do something you don't think that you're going to do? It's like counterintuitive, right? Because like I'm starting with a very personal experience through song, but then when I actually, if I'm going to write about the song, I don't write about the personal experience. I use the emotion, so whatever emotion I was feeling about the song at the time or in the present, I first try and find like language that matches it, and kind of start in a maybe more hypothetical zone. I don't want to box the poem in too soon. So I like to kind of start broad, or that's why a lot of the poems in I'm Not Trying to Hide My Hungers from the World have kind of like almost like punchline titles. So I want to kind of just start with a conceit, or like start with kind of a really hilarious situation and go from there. I'm trying to think of an example. And I think Diane Seuss does this so well. I mean, she is writing very personally, but she has that poem, sometimes I wonder how I'll leave this world. Will I leave this world the way my ex dragged his garbage bag full of clothes through the snow? And she has this like list of ways that one can leave the world. Yeah, I think repetition is such a good vehicle for that. And writing non-linearly. So I could end up writing very personally, but I don't want to stay stuck there. I like to kind of move in between different modes. But I'm trying to think of like an early aught poem where I felt like it was successful, and I don't know if I have any successful ones yet. But they've been so fun.
Well, it sounds amazing though, even as a writing exercise, just to reconnect with an emotion and then go from there. And I might have to try that.
Like there's so many, like, I think Terrence Hayes is the first poet I read who I felt was really doing that with music and also with pop culture figures. Like he has this amazing poem about Mr. T, and it's a sonnet. And the language is so heightened, you know, it's not necessarily language that you would associate with Mr. T, but of course it is. Like, it's Mr. T is an operatic figure, and so he's both writing operatically, but then also, like, you know, I feel like he has some other lines that you wouldn't necessarily associate with Mr. T. And then Hanif Abdurraqib, I feel like obviously he's such a go-to for that. Like, he writes about Carly Rae Jepsen in this like really kind of like gloomy, like melancholic way. And I'm like, you're writing about the singer who did Call Me Maybe, but it's like this like very dark and sad poem, which is perfect.
Yeah,
So,
the contrast
yeah, like,
is fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so good. Right, that dissonance. Yeah.
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 Tell me about teaching writing in prisons.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time since I've done that. The last time was probably like 2011 that I taught my last class at the Tennessee Prison for Women. But before that, before I did grad school, or before I applied to grad schools, I was working full-time at the Suffolk County House of Corrections in Boston. And I taught there for 2 years as just a full-time writing instructor, and it was part of a offender reentry program. And, you know, I feel I tend to get annoyed when I hear people talk about teaching in prisons, because I feel like there's this feeling of like patting yourself on the back, or like, and that could be a projection of mine, but also I'm never going to be okay teaching in a prison. Like, I don't think it's anything to feel proud about. Like, I think that there should not be prisons, period. And so to work inside of one never felt right for me, even if it was like, okay, I'm part of a service that's eventually going to be useful to my students, it still felt like I'm part of the system. And so I think that was something I tried to write a little bit about. I don't know if I did it successfully. I think early on, I was really informed by like poetry of witness. And I know now that feels really just dated. The idea of witness is so like elevating your perspective, when really it's like, write about your own shit. Like, don't focus on what they're doing, focus on what you're doing. And I think I was writing about teaching in prisons before I could really write about my own things that I needed to unpack and heal from. And so I'm always really suspicious of people writing from that, or I don't know, I'm not going to judge anything, but because I think it's just, you know, it's just how someone does it. You know, I love Carolyn Forche, and I love her poetry of witness. I think she does it in a really incredible way.
Yeah, but for anyone who doesn't know what poetry of witness is, tell us a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak too much. I don't think I know enough about it to really describe it. But the idea of a poet going into like a war zone, or into a place where something is happening, and feeling like, okay, it's my job to record what's happening. I need to have the record. And there are people who it's like, I think docu-poetics is actually really, I think that's what it's turned into. Docu-poetics, I think, is incredible. Like Erica Meitner and Claudia Rankin, and like so many poets doing it, where it becomes, the focus is really on yourself, but you're engaging with what's happening around you. And I think just kind of taking the responsibility. I think there was a mode of poetry where the more absent the poet was from the poem, like the better the poem is. And I'm so glad that we're away from that now. Yeah. And you know, that felt like a very, I don't know, it felt like a very male thing to me at the time, like to like, and it, you know, the idea of taking the personal out of the political, which is just so, you know, silly. Like, they're clearly the same. And so yeah, it feels like we're in this really exciting time right now for the way that poets are like Jose Olivares is someone who I think about. He's not, I wouldn't say he's like a docu poet, but just someone who's like engaging with politics in like an incredible way. And Dinesh Smith. I mean, literally every poet out there, I feel like, is doing incredible work. I feel like it's a really rich time for it.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about being at was it McDowell, and sort of, and learning or pushing yourself to be more autobiographical, or to write more from your own life. Was that something, just given this conversation and how we're heading into the more personal, that poetry is heading in the more personal direction? Was that a challenge for you to write from a personal place? Was it a shift, or was it something you always had kind of intended to do?
Yeah. I think it just felt, I think being in a residency will just do that to you because you're just with yourself and, you can socialize, but it's not my favorite thing to do at a residency. I don't want to be like playing ping pong. Like, I want to be like getting sleep or writing. But yeah, you're just like, shout out to people who play ping pong at residencies though, because I do think that is like whatever you need to do to write in the end is the best thing. But yeah, I think being at a residency really made me just reflect and being in a reflective mode of looking back. And probably because at that time when I was pregnant, the future seemed so unknown and so uncertain and so scary. So it was actually really comforting to look back. And I think there's something about being pregnant too, where you want to, I wanted to like take an inventory of these different phases of my life and really kind of like try and close some doors or like try and get some sense of closure with certain things and really feel like entering this new phase kind of cleanly. And I think that was part of it. And like I said, I didn't have I hadn't really found a model yet for how I wanted to do it. And so having these kind of external or these received forms really helped. And so I'm not writing formally in that book, but even just like having a Diane Seuss poem and knowing, okay, I really love how she starts this poem out about her leg and it ends up taking place in Paris. And so like learning how to move from like one end to the other, I felt like was really fun. So knowing that I was going to write about this experience when I'm 14, but end up writing about Courtney Love at the end. And yeah, it kind of gave a lot of shape to, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think like how I felt about autobiographical writing before then, except I think there was this idea of like the confessional that I was always being pushed into. And so I kind of resented it. Like, I'm not going to be confessional. I'm going to be like, I'm going to do what Terrence Hayes does. And I'm just going to be like lyrical and narrative at the same time and not feel like I need to reveal anything about myself. And now I really enjoy writing about myself and my experiences.
I enjoy reading about your personal experiences. So thank you for writing about them. No, I'm interested. Tell us a little bit more about the sense of closing doors through writing and what types of doors you felt like you needed to close, why poetry was the vehicle through which to do that, and how maybe that changed once you gave birth. Like, did you feel like you succeeded in doing what you set out to do there? Or do you feel like there's still doors that you're like standing in? Doorways you're standing in?
Yeah, right. They're probably, I don't think any of the doors really stayed shut, but at least I saw maybe the people I wanted to keep out from coming into those doors anymore, like kind of old monsters or something that would I'm trying to think of a way to say it. I think I maybe, and, just on a purely like creative level, like wanting to get rid of old enemies of like self-esteem. So really going back to like high school years and saying like, okay, those mean girls do not have room at the table anymore. Like, why was I carrying their voices for so long? I don't know, but it's time to let them go. And so I feel like there are different stages of kind of looking back and saying, oh, I'm still carrying on to something that teacher told me. All right, time to let that go. And those things do feel, I mean, like the work now, I think the work keeps going. Like I was like, okay, I'm repeating that like mean thought to myself. Like, all right, let's let that go again. But it gets easier.
How did you identify those? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but that's different. That's more like how I come to the page. And then there's like closing doors in terms of subjects, which I do feel like that happens. Like there's certain things I feel like I'm not interested in writing about anymore. But that didn't feel as much a part of getting ready for motherhood as like kind of letting go of the way that I saw myself as a younger person that wasn't helping me anymore. Yeah.
Why did it feel like that was so necessary in preparation for motherhood?
I don't know. I mean, I want to hear what maybe if you've had this experience too, except I think just this desire to come into motherhood feeling like I'm a person that can be relied on and I'm not going to pass on this shit to my child. Like really, wanting to take an inventory of what are the stories I'm telling myself about myself and my history that I don't want her to have. And I think, that it starts in pregnancy and then it continues like what, because it's having a child, such a harsh reflection of like, oh, okay, I guess I haven't dealt with this, or like, because I'm hearing my child parrot this back to me, and like, fuck, no, I don't want you to feel that way, and and really, and I don't think it's like being a perfectionist, because I do think I know, like, I do think I've arrived at this feeling like being authentic with my daughter is the most important thing, and I don't want her to see me as perfect, and not that she would, but that's not my motivation anymore. But I do, yeah, it felt really kind of just like a natural, like, how do you say the word, sloughing away, like exfoliating. And the way, yeah, that my body was changing, it just made sense. There was like less room for my internal organs in my body. They were getting squished. And there was less room for like, shitty thoughts in my head. Like it just really felt like, okay, time to clear out.
Yeah, I love that. Did it have anything to do with the fact that you have a daughter? Like it's hard to imagine what you might have felt if you were going to have a son instead. But I know that having a daughter for me brought up a lot of questions that I asked myself about my own perception of women's bodies and sexuality and relationships and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely. And like also just my relationships with other women, like friendships and just like women relatives. And I think part of that was just wanting to make sure I'm like building a strong foundation. Like I want everyone in my life to be someone who is really going to show up for me and my child.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of winnowing away, and like you kind of find like certain people who you love, they're not really on board for this next chapter of the ride. And there's a lot of grieving to do, I think, in that transition. Like grieving your old self, but also grieving the way that you relate to other people, because it changes so much.
It does.
But then makes room for something else. And and I think, grief, right, is something I tried to write about, or that feeling of, like wanting to celebrate this new chapter, but then grieving the way that I was in the world before. And I feel, and now that I've done that grief work, I can like really love, like 30-year-old Kendra, and like I feel like, okay, you were doing all the things you needed to do so that you can get to this next place.
I love that. I think since we have a few minutes left, why don't we close with another poem?
I would love that. All right, I'll read I Pump Milk Like a Boss.
Yes.
I pump milk on the side of the road where the grass is biblical green, as if first cousin to the cow, her pink and swollen tits immaculate as the plumbing of a church organ sending up calls to God, brassy mesh of notes, fermented and dank as kush. I pump milk with my bare hands into a bar's bathroom sink, above which is a mirror where someone scrawled, "I love cricket pussy," and below that, "Everyone deserves to be loved." I look at myself under the fingered smudge, the bodily fluids spattered like haikus, and I pump as if my milk is propaganda, fingers bowing across my chest like a pawnshop violin, milky graffiti tagging the spit-clogged drain. I pump like I'm writing my name in blood, which turns to the milk my child sucks dry, which she turns into blood. I pump like I have a tattoo on my pudenda that says Aerosmith backwards. I pump as if my hands have teeth, one combat boot hitched up on the toilet seat, each hiss of milk chanting like a choir, "Yes, bitch, yes, yes, bitch, yes." My tits bitten and salt-veined, as when my baby took her first gulp of air, humming from the engorged crevasse of me like a herd of wildebeest, as if the hive of me could have burst, the infrared honey, the glop-glop of afterbirth dripping down my left leg, spittle and amen, amniotic residue fluorescent with prayer. Do men lactate is a popular Google search, and I wondered what would happen if they could. Are presidents lifting their offspring to their breasts in the deep pockets of night, listening to the dribble of milk sipped from the pulpit of their bodies? Tonight, my breasts became so engorged, I said I'd pay someone to suck my tits, half joking. But a woman who heard me followed me to the bathroom, read me a sex poem while I pumped my milk, leaning away from the need in her voice, and the milk came slow, and I pumped and waited for her to finish, and a streetlight scribbled in the parking lot. And I know there's a price we pay for loneliness, and a price we pay to forget it. And so I dedicate my libido to my younger self, and this is how I want to live. milk-stained, a little bit emptied, a little bit in love with the abundance of my body, my milk pale yellow with a layer of cream, which I will save long after it's turned, praising its curdled glow every time I open the fridge, as if its presence is enough to keep me safe, as if it's enough to make me invincible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra.
Thank
Thank you so much for joining me. This was such a wonderful conversation. I could talk to you all night.
I know. I feel like I'm so bummed. Well,
I know.
Continued.
Yes, please come back. Please do. And stick around afterwards so I can say goodbye. But thank you again. And and everyone, buy this book. I'm going to hold it up one more time. It might not be on the Writer Mother Monster bookshop page yet, but I'll put it up tonight so that if you click that link, you'll find the book right there. So
thank you so much. And I'm excited to get my Writer Mother Monster tumbler. I saw that you have those, and I'm super excited to have my coffee.
Yes,
thank you for the work that you do. This is just, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Kendra. You too.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us as always. As Kendra mentioned, we now have a Writer Mother Monster insulated tumbler so that if you are writing at 3 a.m. and you need some coffee, or at 3 p.m. and you'd like a tumbler of wine, whatever floats your boat, you have a nifty Writer Mother Monster tumbler to drink it out of. Just go to the website and you'll find it under merchandise. But enough of that. Thank you, Kendra, again, and we will see you not next week. We're taking a little break, but in July for the next episode of Writer Mother Monster. Thank you, and good night.